The wheelchair was empty, but the dog beside it was waiting as if someone's life still depended on being found. Rain swept across the Blue Ridge Road in thin silver lines, ticking against the hood of Nathan Reed's old pickup and blurring the last light of evening. He almost drove past. The road curved sharply between wet pines, and the broken wheelchair lay half in the ditch, one wheel twisted at an angle, the metal frame dark with mud. Beside it sat a German shepherd. The dog's sable coat was soaked through, black along the spine and brown at the chest and legs. Water ran from the tips of his ears. He did not bark. He did not chase the truck. He simply watched Nathan through the rain with amber eyes that held a calm urgency no stray should have possessed. Nathan slowed, pulled onto the shoulder, and shut off the engine. For several seconds, the only sounds were rain on metal and the faint turning of the damaged wheel in the wind. He stepped outside in a dark field jacket, boots sinking into the soft shoulder of the road. "Easy," he said. The shepherd remained still. Nathan approached the wheelchair first. A canvas medical pouch hung from one handle. One footrest was bent. Across the seat ran a long smear of wet clay that continued over the edge and onto the road, not downhill toward the ditch, but uphill toward a narrow trail nearly hidden by brush. Nathan followed the mark with his eyes. No person, no voice, no movement between the trees. "Hello," he called. The mountain gave back only rain. The shepherd rose. He placed one front paw on the wheelchair's broken rim, looked at Nathan, then turned toward the trail. Nathan crouched and examined the dog without touching him. Worn brown leather collar. No tag. A shallow scrape above one front paw. Strong posture despite the cold. Trained, Nathan thought. Not merely obedient. Working. The shepherd stepped closer and pressed one paw briefly against Nathan's chest. The contact was light, deliberate. Then he moved uphill 10 yards and looked back. Nathan's hand drifted toward the inside pocket of his jacket, where an old military compass rested against his ribs. He had spent 3 years avoiding roads that felt like missions and people who looked as though they needed answers. He was supposed to be driving to a veterans recovery center outside Roanoke, signing an intake form, and leaving before anyone could ask him to stay. This was not his responsibility. He reached for his phone anyway. No signal. The shepherd returned to the wheelchair, lowered his nose beneath the frame, and pulled free a narrow strap attached to the medical pouch. He carried it to Nathan and set it at his boots. Nathan opened the pouch. Inside were insulin pens wrapped in a cooling sleeve, a small bottle of water, and a medical identification card bearing the name Walter Hayes. Age 67. Limited mobility. Emergency contact Emma Hayes. Nathan looked again at the muddy trail. The shepherd had already started uphill. "Wait," Nathan called. The dog stopped. Nathan raised one hand without thinking, palm angled in the old military hold signal. The shepherd sat immediately at the left edge of the trail and fixed his eyes on Nathan, waiting for the next command. Rain slid down Nathan's face. Something cold moved through him that had nothing to do with the weather. He pointed toward the ground near the wheelchair. "Find." The dog turned, searched the ditch in a tight pattern, and returned carrying a gray wool glove. Nathan took it. The fabric was damp, but still faintly warm. He looked toward the darkening slope. The shepherd stood, touched Nathan's knee once, and began climbing again. This time, Nathan followed. Behind them, the empty wheelchair rocked gently in the rain. Ahead, the trail rose into the trees, marked by a broken cane, a dragged line through the mud, and one shoe lying where no shoe should have been. Nathan stopped beside it. The shepherd did not look downhill. He looked higher, toward a dim yellow light near the top of the ridge. Then he gave one low sound and kept climbing. 3 hours earlier, Nathan had been driving south beneath a low ceiling of clouds, the Blue Ridge rising and falling beyond the windshield like a dark tide. The old pickup smelled of rain, worn leather, and coffee gone cold in the cup holder. On the passenger seat lay a folded intake packet from the Veterans Recovery Center outside Roanoke. He had filled in his name, rank, and emergency contact, then stopped. The final page asked what he hoped to recover. Nathan had left it blank. He told himself he was only going to sign the papers, listen politely, and leave before sunset. He had no intention of staying in a place where strangers spoke softly and watched for cracks in a man's voice. For 3 years, he had built his life around not being needed. Short-term jobs, cheap motel rooms, Long drives with no destination important enough to disappoint. Responsibility had once been the shape of his entire world. Now even the word felt heavy. Beneath his jacket, in the inside pocket closest to his heart, rested a brass military compass. The glass was scratched. One corner of the casing carried a shallow dent. It had belonged to Corporal Owen Carter, the youngest Marine in Nathan's final unit, and the only one who still believed Nathan could lead them home when the weather closed in and the radios failed. Nathan remembered Owen holding the compass beneath a red flashlight, smiling despite the cold. "Needle still points north," he had said. "That has to count for something." Nathan had answered with an order. He could no longer remember the exact words. He remembered only the silence afterward. The mission had turned without warning. Roads closed. Visibility disappeared. Men were separated in the confusion. By dawn, everyone except Owen had returned to the staging point. Nathan had spent years rebuilding that night from fragments, always arriving at the same conclusion. One different decision. One earlier turn. One order held back. Owen might have come home. No official report blamed Nathan. That almost made it worse. The highway narrowed as he climbed into the mountains. Rain began as a mist, then hardened against the windshield. His phone displayed the recovery center's address and an arrival time of 6:40. At 6:10, he pulled into a gas station and nearly turned around. He stood beneath the awning with the intake packet in one hand and the compass in the other, watching trucks hiss along the wet pavement. A family entered the store laughing, the father carrying a sleeping child against his shoulder. Nathan looked away. The compass needle trembled, then settled. North. Always north. He closed it and returned to the pickup. 20 miles later, the recovery center called. Nathan let the phone ring until the screen went dark. A voicemail followed. A woman named Claire said the front desk would stay open and that there was no pressure if he needed more time. He almost laughed. Time was the only thing he had been given too much of. The mountain road grew quieter after he left the main highway. Houses disappeared. Cell service faded. Fog gathered between the pines. Nathan lowered his speed and kept both hands on the wheel, moving through the rain as carefully as if every curve required permission. Then, just before dusk, something pale appeared near the ditch. Metal. A wheel turning slowly in the wind. He braked. The pickup slid several feet before stopping. Through the rain, he saw the empty wheelchair and the German shepherd beside it. For one moment, Nathan considered driving on and calling for help from the next town. Then the dog looked directly at him. Not pleading. Expecting. The same look Owen had given him before every difficult crossing. Nathan shut off the engine. By the time he stepped into the rain, he had already missed his appointment. He did not know it yet, but the road uphill was about to ask the question he had left blank on the intake form. The German shepherd waited beside the trail until Nathan reached him, then moved uphill at a steady pace, never more than 20 yards ahead. Rain slid from the dog's sable coat and gathered along the worn leather collar. Every few steps, he looked back to confirm Nathan was still following. The path narrowed between wet rhododendron and pine roots, climbing toward the dim yellow light Nathan had seen through the trees. Mud pulled at his boots. The broken cane lay behind them now, along with the gray glove and the single shoe. Nathan tried to fit the pieces together. A man with limited mobility had left a wheelchair on the road, lost one shoe, dropped his medicine, and somehow continued uphill. It made no sense. The shepherd stopped beside a shallow ditch and stared into the brush. Nathan raised his hand and gave the old search signal without thinking. The dog lowered his nose and worked the slope in a careful pattern, then disappeared behind a stone wall covered in moss. A moment later, he barked once. Nathan climbed over the low wall and found an elderly man lying beneath a cedar, one shoulder resting against the earth. His gray jacket was soaked. His breathing was shallow but steady. A white plastic medical bracelet circled his wrist, but the name was not Walter Hayes. It read Harold Bennett. Nathan knelt beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" Harold opened his eyes slowly. "Walter," he whispered. "Where is he?" Nathan checked his pulse, then covered him with his own rain shell. Harold's skin felt cold. A small glucose meter lay in the leaves nearby, its screen dark from the rain. Nathan opened the medical pouch he had carried from the wheelchair and found glucose gel, water, and dry gauze. The insulin did not belong to Harold, but the gel might help until rescue arrived. He placed a small amount inside Harold's cheek and kept him upright. Tell me what happened. Harold swallowed with effort. I was walking home. Felt weak. Fell near the wall. His eyes moved toward the shepherd. Walter saw me from the road. Got out of his chair. Nathan looked uphill. He left the wheelchair to reach you? Harold nodded. Crawled over. Gave me the gel. Then said he needed the emergency radio from the shed. Nathan glanced at the dog. The shepherd stood between Harold and the trail, alert but calm. He told Scout to stay by the chair. Harold continued. Find someone. Bring them up. Scout. The name fit. Nathan placed a hand against the dog's shoulder. Scout did not move, but his eyes softened for a moment. Nathan pulled out his phone again. One bar appeared, then vanished. He climbed several feet higher until the screen caught a weak signal and called emergency services. He gave the road marker, the location of the wheelchair, and Harold's condition. The dispatcher confirmed a rescue team was coming from the valley, but the storm had slowed traffic. At least 20 minutes. Nathan returned to Harold and checked the rain shell around him. Help is coming. Harold gripped his sleeve. Walter kept going. How far? Old maintenance shed. Maybe half a mile uphill. Nathan looked toward the yellow light above the trees. Half a mile on that slope would be difficult for anyone. For a man who had left his wheelchair, it was nearly unthinkable. Scout stepped toward the trail, then turned back. One paw touched Nathan's knee. The gesture was the same as before. Not panic. Instruction. Nathan hesitated. Harold needed someone with him, but staying would cost time Walter might not have. Scout walked to Harold, lay down beside him, then looked uphill. Nathan understood. The dog was telling him Harold was stable enough to wait. He wrapped the emergency blanket from the pouch around the old man and placed the remaining glucose within reach. The rescuers will follow the marked trail, Nathan said. Scout and I are going after Walter. Harold closed his eyes and nodded. Nathan rose. Scout did not. Come on, Nathan said. The dog looked at Harold, then back at Nathan. For 1 second, Nathan thought Scout would refuse to leave. Then the shepherd stood, pressed his nose briefly to Harold's hand, and returned to Nathan's left side. Together, they climbed toward the light, while behind them the first distant siren began to rise through the rain. The trail steepened beyond the stone wall, turning from packed mud into a narrow shelf cut across the hillside. Scout moved carefully now, placing each paw between slick roots and loose stones. Nathan followed with one hand against the slope, rain running beneath his collar and down his back. The yellow light ahead came from a small maintenance shed with a single bulb burning above the door. It flickered through the trees, close enough to promise shelter, far enough to make every step feel longer. Halfway there, Scout stopped beside a snapped length of nylon strap caught on a branch. Nathan pulled it free. One end carried a metal buckle from the wheelchair frame. Below it, the mud held a deep drag mark and 2 handprints leading uphill. Walter had not simply fallen away from the road. He had chosen to leave the chair and keep climbing. Why? Nathan whispered. Scout looked toward the shed. The answer was somewhere above them. They moved on. Near the top of the slope, Nathan found a second shoe, then a wool cap dark with rain. Beside it lay a portable radio with a cracked casing. He pressed the power button. Nothing. Walter had reached this far, found the radio, and discovered it useless. Scout circled once, nose low, then moved past the shed toward a covered loading area behind it. Nathan followed and saw Walter beneath the wooden awning, resting against a stack of weathered boards. His clothes were soaked. One hand still gripped the radio antenna. He was conscious, but barely. Walter Hayes. Nathan called. The older man opened his eyes and looked first at Scout. Relief moved across his face. Good boy, he breathed. Scout crossed the distance and pressed his head against Walter's shoulder. Nathan knelt beside them and checked Walter's breathing and pulse. Weak, but steady. He wrapped him in the emergency blanket and gave him a small amount of water. Harold is alive, Nathan said. Rescue is on the way. Walter closed his eyes for a moment. He needed help. You left your wheelchair to reach him. Chair could not clear the wall. Walter's voice was thin but certain. Scout could. Nathan looked at the dog. The last command had been simple and almost impossible. Stay by the road. Find someone. Bring them uphill. Scout had done exactly that. A distant siren drifted through the rain, closer now but still below the ridge. Nathan checked the shed. Inside, he found a wooden panel used for moving equipment, a coil of rope, and an old pulley fixed to a ceiling beam above the loading area. Enough to create a controlled slide down to the wider part of the trail. Not enough to rush. He returned to Walter. "We can wait for the team." Walter opened his eyes and looked toward the darkening slope. Road below floods fast. Nathan heard it then, the growing rush of water moving through the drainage channel beside the trail. If they waited too long, the lower crossing might become impassable. He studied the rope, the board, the angle of the hill. Every part of him wanted certainty. A map, a team, a clear order from someone else. Scout stepped between them and touched one paw to Nathan's wrist. The contact was light, deliberate, familiar. Nathan took a slow breath. "All right," he said. "We do this carefully." He patted the board with folded canvas, secured Walter across the chest and legs, then threaded the rope through the pulley to reduce the load. Scout carried the loose messenger line from Nathan to the lower anchor point, placing it where Nathan directed. No pulling beyond his strength. No impossible task. Just one trained action after another. When Nathan bent to tighten the final knot, the brass compass slipped from his jacket and struck the wooden floor. Scout froze. His ears lifted. He crossed to it, touched the metal with his nose, then sat at Nathan's left side. One paw rose and rested against Nathan's hand. Walter stared at the compass. "Where did you get that?" Nathan looked at him. It belonged to a Marine named Owen Carter. Walter's face changed. Rain tapped against the awning. Scout turned his head left and waited for a command he had learned years before. Walter whispered, "That dog was supposed to go home with Owen." For a moment, Nathan heard only the rain tapping against the shed roof and the soft rush of water below the ridge. Scout remained seated at his left side, one paw resting against Nathan's hand, eyes fixed on the brass compass between them. Walter watched the dog, then looked at Nathan with recognition spreading slowly across his tired face. "Owen came here twice," he said. Nathan's throat tightened. "When?" "About 4 years ago, before his last deployment." Walter shifted beneath the blanket, speaking carefully between breaths. He had applied for a service dog through the Veterans Program. Scout was still in advanced training then. Owen wanted a dog that could handle crowds, night terrors, and long silences. He said the quiet was the hardest part. Nathan looked at Scout. The shepherd lowered his nose to the compass again, then turned left and waited. "That sequence," Walter continued. "Owen taught it during scent drills. He hid the compass in different places and sent Scout to find it. Every time the dog returned, Owen would sit him on the left and tap his paw." Nathan closed his fingers around the metal casing. The dented corner pressed into his palm. He remembered Owen checking that compass before patrols, spinning it once between his fingers whenever tension rose. Nathan had carried it since the morning they found Owen's empty pack near the staging road. He had thought of it as evidence of failure. Scout knew it as the beginning of a game, a command, a promise that someone would return. Walter's voice softened. The transfer was supposed to happen when Owen came home. Nathan looked toward the rain beyond the awning. He did not. "No," Walter said. "So Scout stayed with me." The words did not accuse him. That made them harder to bear. Nathan secured the compass inside his jacket and checked Walter's straps again. "We need to move before the lower crossing fills." Walter nodded. Nathan positioned himself behind the padded board and fed the rope through the pulley. Scout carried the messenger line 10 yards downhill, placed it beside a pine root, and returned without being called. Nathan gave the hold signal. Scout sat. The descent began. Nathan controlled the rope one measured length at a time, guiding the board over wet leaves and packed mud. Walter kept both hands across his chest. Scout moved beside him, stepping around roots, then looking back whenever the board slowed. The rain had turned the drainage channel into a narrow brown stream. Each minute deepened it. Halfway down, the board caught against a buried branch. Nathan stopped the line, anchored it around a tree, and moved forward to clear the obstruction. His boot slipped, but Scout pressed his shoulder against Nathan's leg before he lost balance. Nathan steadied himself and looked down at the dog. "Still with me?" Scout touched his paw to Nathan's hand. One quiet answer. Nathan cleared the branch and continued. Below them, voices rose through the trees. Rescue workers had reached Harold and were climbing toward the shed. Flashlights appeared between the trunks, white beams moving through the rain. "We have you," someone called. Nathan did not release the rope until 2 rescuers secured Walter's board and checked every strap. Only then did the weight leave his hands. Walter reached for Scout as the team prepared to carry him down. "Good boy," he whispered. Scout leaned close, but his eyes returned to Nathan. At the wider trail, Harold sat beneath a dry blanket near the rescue vehicle, color returning to his face. He lifted one hand when he saw Walter. Neither man spoke. They simply looked at each other across the rain, both alive because one had refused to leave the other alone. A paramedic guided Nathan toward the road and asked whether he needed treatment. Nathan shook his head. At the broken wheelchair, Scout stopped beside the bent rim and waited. Nathan took the intake packet from his truck. The final question was still blank. "What do you hope to recover?" He looked at Walter, at Harold, and at the dog standing faithfully in the rain. Then he wrote one word: direction. By morning, the rain had moved east, leaving the Blue Ridge washed clean beneath a pale silver sky. Nathan sat in the corridor of a small county hospital with the intake packet folded in his jacket pocket and the brass compass resting in his hand. Across the hall, Walter slept beneath a warm blanket while Emma Hayes spoke quietly with the doctor. Harold was stable in another room. Scout lay at Nathan's boots, dry now, his sable coat brushed clean by a nurse who had found an old towel and refused to stop until the dog looked less like the storm he had crossed. Every few minutes, Scout lifted his head and checked Walter's door. Then he checked Nathan. He seemed unwilling to lose sight of either man. Emma approached carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. She was in her early 30s, tired but composed, with the steady movements of someone accustomed to caring for others before herself. "You are Nathan Reed," she said. "My father told me." Nathan stood. "He saved Harold before I found him." "That sounds like him." She handed Nathan 1 cup, and Scout did the rest. Nathan looked down. "Scout brought me." Emma's eyes moved to the compass in his hand. "Dad said you knew Owen Carter." Nathan closed his fingers around it. "I was his staff sergeant." Emma sat beside him. "Owen spent months training with Scout. Dad believed they were meant for each other." The words settled heavily, but not cruelly. Nathan waited. "Owen did not want people thinking he needed help," she continued. "He came the first day in uniform, stood near the door, and said he was only there to observe." Scout walked across the room, placed a training rope at his feet, and sat down like the matter had already been decided. A faint smile touched her face. "Dad said Owen laughed for the first time that afternoon." Nathan stared at the scratched glass of the compass. He had known Owen's humor in the field, the quick grin that appeared whenever weather ruined a plan. He had not known about the sleepless nights or the service dog application. Men often revealed their deepest battles to strangers because they were afraid their brothers would recognize themselves in the story. Walter's door opened. A nurse motioned them inside. He was awake, color returning to his face, though exhaustion still softened his voice. Scout rose at once and moved to the bedside. Walter placed one hand against the dog's neck. "You completed the assignment," he murmured. Scout leaned closer. Nathan remained near the door until Walter looked at him. "The last time Owen trained with Scout, he hid that compass uphill behind my shed," Walter said. "Scout found it in under 4 minutes. Owen told him, 'One day, if I get lost, you bring the right person to me.'" Nathan's breath caught. "He said that." "He was joking," Walter replied. "Mostly." Silence filled the room. Outside the window, clouds broke over the ridgeline, revealing wet trees bright in the morning sun. Nathan looked at Scout. "Why did he respond to me?" Walter's gaze dropped to the compass. "Scent. Command pattern. Memory. Dogs build meaning from what we leave behind." Then he looked directly at Nathan. "But recognition only explains why he trusted you. It does not explain why you followed." Nathan had no answer. He remembered the empty wheelchair, the glove still warm, the shoe in the mud, and the moment Scout pressed one paw against his chest. He had followed because something in the dog's certainty had reached a part of him that orders, reports, and years of guilt could not. Emma placed the intake packet on the bedside table. "The recovery center called," she said. "They said your room is still available." Nathan glanced at the final page. Direction. One word, written in wet ink at the roadside. Walter noticed it. "You should go." Nathan looked at Scout. The shepherd remained beside Walter, but his amber eyes were fixed on Nathan. "What about him?" Nathan asked. Walter rested his hand on the worn leather collar. "Scout has spent 4 years waiting for a future that never arrived." He paused, then opened his fingers. Scout stepped away from the bed and crossed the room. He sat at Nathan's left side. Walter smiled faintly. Maybe it just did. Nathan arrived at the Veterans Recovery Center just before noon with Scout sitting upright in the passenger seat of the old pickup. The road curved through wet hills and opened onto a low brick building surrounded by maple trees, training fields, and a wide porch where two veterans sat with service dogs at their feet. Nathan slowed at the entrance. For one brief moment, every instinct told him to keep driving. Scout turned his head and looked at him. No command, no pressure, just the same patient attention he had shown beside the broken wheelchair. Nathan parked. Inside, the lobby smelled of coffee, clean wood, and rain drying from jackets. Claire Mason, the woman who had left the voicemail, met him near the front desk. She was in her 40s, with a calm face and a voice that never hurried. "You made it," she said. Nathan handed her the intake packet. She read the final line, then looked at Scout. Direction is a good place to start. The first week was harder than Nathan expected. The center did not ask him to explain Owen on the first day or name every memory that kept him awake. Instead, they gave him a room, a schedule, and simple work. Feed the dogs at 6. Walk the lower trail at 7. Help repair the training fence before lunch. Scout stayed close, but never crowded him. When Nathan woke before dawn, the shepherd sat beside the door. When voices in the dining room grew too loud, Scout placed one paw against Nathan's boot and waited. The gesture became an anchor, not an order to stay, a reminder that leaving was a choice, not a reflex. Walter called from the hospital every evening. His condition improved, and a physical therapist began helping him prepare for a new wheelchair. Harold returned home with his daughter and sent a handwritten note thanking Walter for crossing the hill. Nathan kept the note folded beside the compass. On the 10th day, Claire brought Nathan to the service dog training barn. Scout entered first and stopped beneath a row of hanging scent pouches. The room was bright and quiet, with rubber flooring and wide windows facing the hills. Walter sent his records, Claire said. Scout completed nearly every stage of mobility and support training. He never received final placement after Owen died. Nathan ran one hand along the compass in his pocket. "I am not Owen." "Scout knows that," Claire replied. "Dogs remember. They do not confuse." She handed Nathan a light canvas pouch. "Hide this." Nathan placed the compass inside, then tucked the pouch behind a wooden training barrier. Scout watched from the starting line, body still. Nathan returned, raised his hand, and gave the signal. "Find." Scout moved at once. He searched the room in deliberate arcs, checked the benches, then stopped at the barrier. He retrieved the pouch and carried it back. At Nathan's feet, he sat on the left and lifted one paw. Nathan knelt and opened the pouch. The compass lay inside, the needle steady beneath scratched glass. For years, Nathan had carried it as proof that he had failed to lead one man home. Scout treated it as something meant to be found. "Good work," Nathan whispered. Scout pressed his paw into Nathan's palm. Later that afternoon, Nathan joined a group session on the porch. He sat near the edge, ready to leave if anyone asked too much. A young veteran across from him spoke about waking every night convinced he had forgotten someone. No one interrupted. No one tried to correct him. Nathan listened until the man finished. Then, before fear could close his throat, Nathan said, "I know that feeling." The words were small. They changed the room anyway. Scout lay between his boots, breathing slowly. 3 weeks passed. Nathan repaired kennels, assisted with training drills, and began walking the uphill trail behind the center each morning. At first, he stopped halfway. Then Scout touched his hand, and they continued. One afternoon, Claire found him reviewing placement forms in the training barn. "Walter called," she said. "He wants Scout's assignment made official, but only if you agree." Nathan looked through the window at the shepherd waiting in the rain, patient as ever. "What happens if I am not ready?" Claire followed his gaze. "Then you keep learning together." Nathan opened the form. Under handler, he wrote his name. When he stepped outside, Scout moved automatically to his left side. Nathan did not feel repaired. He did not feel finished. He only felt the road beneath his feet and the weight of a living companion beside him. For the first time, that was enough. By the beginning of the 3rd month, Nathan and Scout had settled into a rhythm that felt less like treatment and more like work worth doing. Mornings began before sunrise, when fog rested low over the Blue Ridge and the training fields smelled of wet grass and pine. Nathan checked equipment, reviewed dog handling plans, and walked the perimeter with Scout at his left side. The shepherd had become his official partner, but Nathan still thought of the word carefully. Partner meant trust. It also meant responsibility. Some days that felt steady. Other days it felt like standing near the edge of an old memory. Walter was discharged from the hospital during the second week of October and transferred to the recovery center for physical therapy. Emma brought him in on a bright afternoon, seated in a new lightweight wheelchair with dark blue rims and a reinforced frame. Scout saw him from across the courtyard. The dog stopped, ears lifting, then crossed the distance at a controlled walk. Walter opened both arms. Scout placed his head against the older man's chest and remained there for several quiet seconds. Nathan stood nearby, unsure whether to step back or stay. Walter looked over the dog's shoulder. "He did not forget me," he said. "He does not have to forget you to choose me," Nathan replied. Walter smiled. That is the right answer. During the weeks that followed, Nathan helped Walter train with the new chair on ramps, gravel paths, and uneven ground. Scout moved between them naturally, retrieving dropped gloves, carrying a light pouch, and stopping whenever Walter needed more space. Nathan began assisting other veterans in the mobility program as well. He taught them how to read a dog's posture, how to give clear hand signals, and how to wait without filling every silence. Claire noticed the change before Nathan did. "You are leading again," she said one afternoon. Nathan tightened a strap on a training harness. "I am helping. That is usually how it starts." The old hill remained on Nathan's mind. The county had repaired the washed-out drainage channel and cleared the trail to Walter's shed, but the broken wheelchair still sat behind the maintenance garage, waiting to be collected for scrap. Nathan visited it once with Scout. The bent rim had dried beneath a layer of red dust. The canvas medical pouch was gone, but the mud stain remained across the seat like a faded map. Scout sniffed the frame, then looked uphill. Nathan understood the question. 2 days later, Walter asked to return to the road where Scout had found him. Emma hesitated. Claire wanted a full route assessment. Nathan said nothing until Walter looked directly at him. "I am not asking to prove I can do it alone," Walter said. "I am asking to see the place without remembering only the rain." Nathan nodded. "Then we plan it properly." They chose a clear morning. 2 staff members followed at a distance with medical supplies, while Nathan walked behind Walter's new wheelchair and Scout moved on the left. The lower road was easy. The trail beyond the stone wall was not. Wet leaves covered the climb, and the grade sharpened near the old cedar. Nathan checked Walter's breathing, the wheel locks, and the weather. "We can turn back," he said. Walter looked uphill. "Can we continue safely?" Nathan studied the path. "Yes." "Then that is not the same question." They kept moving. At the place where Harold had been found, Walter stopped and placed one hand on the moss-covered stones. Scout sat beside him. No one spoke. Higher up, the maintenance shed appeared between the trees, its yellow porch light replaced by a clean white fixture. Nathan felt the compass against his chest. Owen had once hidden it there for Scout to find. Walter had crawled there for a radio. Nathan had reached it believing every step was a debt. Now they climbed with measured pauses, good equipment, and people close enough to help. Near the final rise, Walter's wheels slipped slightly in damp soil. Nathan caught the handles and steadied the chair. Scout turned, touched one paw to Nathan's hand, then faced uphill again. Nathan took a breath. "Still with me?" Walter asked. Nathan tightened his grip. "I am still with you." Together, they pushed toward the top, where the morning light waited beyond the trees. At the top of the hill, the trees opened onto a narrow clearing washed in morning light. The maintenance shed stood behind them, quiet now, its clean white fixture dim beneath the sun. Beyond the ridge, the Blue Ridge Mountains rolled into the distance in layers of blue and gray, softened by mist. Nathan guided Walter's wheelchair onto level ground and locked the brakes. Scout sat between them, breathing steadily, his sable coat bright where the light touched it. For several moments, no one spoke. Walter looked back down the trail they had climbed. From here, the road seemed smaller than it had in memory. The stone wall, the cedar, the place where Harold had waited, the bend where the old chair had failed. All of it remained. None of it held them the same way. Walter rested both hands on the wheels. "I thought I would feel different when I reached this spot again," he said. Nathan stood beside him. "Do you?" Walter considered the question. "I feel less alone." Scout lifted one paw and placed it against Walter's hand. The older man smiled. Nathan reached into his jacket and removed Owen's compass. He opened the brass case. The needle trembled once, then settled north. For years, he had believed the compass carried only the direction he should have taken on one terrible night. Now it pointed across a world still waiting to be entered. Walter watched him. Owen used to say that thing never told him where home was, he said. Only which way he was facing. Nathan looked at Scout. The shepherd's amber eyes were calm, patient, free of accusation. Nathan closed the compass and slipped it back into his pocket. Maybe that is enough. They remained in the clearing until the mist began to lift. On the walk down, Nathan controlled the wheelchair carefully, using the safety strap at every steep turn. Scout moved just ahead, checking the trail and returning whenever the distance widened. At the stone wall, Walter paused and looked toward the cedar where Harold had been found. Someone had placed a small wooden marker there, not with a name, but with 3 words carved into the grain. No one left behind. Walter touched the marker with his fingertips. Nathan did not ask who had made it. Some kindnesses were stronger without explanation. Weeks passed. Walter continued therapy at the center. Harold visited on Sundays, bringing chess pieces and stories that grew longer each time he told them. Emma volunteered in the mobility program. Nathan became a regular instructor, though he still resisted the title. He taught veterans how to fit harnesses, how to read a working dog's signals, and how to trust progress that came in inches instead of miles. Scout stayed at his left side through all of it. On difficult mornings, when Nathan woke with the old silence pressing against his chest, Scout brought the canvas scent pouch and placed it beside the bed. Inside was the compass. Nathan would hold it, breathe once, and follow the dog outside. Winter came slowly to the mountains. One clear afternoon, Nathan, Walter, and Scout returned to the lower road where the broken wheelchair had first been found. The old frame was gone. In its place, the county had installed a wooden bench facing the trail. Walter parked his new chair beside it. Nathan sat. Scout settled between them. Rain had once hidden the ridge behind gray sheets. Now sunlight moved through bare branches and rested across the road. Walter looked uphill. Still a long climb, he said. Nathan nodded. It always will be. Scout rose and touched one paw to Nathan's hand. Nathan stood, took hold of Walter's wheelchair, and looked toward the trail. He no longer saw a road leading back to failure. He saw work, breath, distance, and people waiting at the top. Ready? He asked. Walter placed both hands on the wheels. Scout moved to Nathan's left side. Ready. They started uphill together. The grade did not soften. The stones did not move aside. Nathan still had to stop once to catch his breath, and Walter still had to lean forward when the path grew steep. Scout still turned back to make sure both men were following. Nothing about the hill had become easier. Nathan had simply stopped climbing it alone.